Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. We have a forecast update as we go through the early to middle part of July today, and that's coming off of what will be the biggest heat wave of the summer, at least so far, with record-breaking heat for multiple days, spreading from the Midwest into the northeast part of the country. We'll talk about how long this lingers around, whether we see it return in July or whether we'll see a pattern change as we head into the middle part of summer. Wanted to start out this morning though with the current radar. We have some heavy rain ongoing right now across parts of eastern Iowa. We've had storm clusters and strong to severe storms moving through this region as we've gone throughout the morning hours today. We put the radar into motion. This is as of 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Central Time. You can see these storms continuing to kind of regenerate and push from northwest to southeast across the state. Some of that working into northwestern parts of Illinois. If you watched our AM Ag forecast update this morning, or you got that report, we had circled an area, southeast Iowa, northwest Illinois, where maybe data little bit underdone, not seeing this as well this morning. Our team's been sending out updates on the Clarity platform to folks in this region this morning. And again, if we take a look at the observed rainfall, certainly here have dropped, just this is the last 3 hours, have dropped some decent rainfall totals. Here near Iowa Falls, more than an inch to locally an inch and a half of rain. And if you look at just the last 24 hours, you can certainly see the corridor where this rain has been falling. This is updated as of an hour ago. Locally 2 inches plus of rain just to the north and to the west of Mason City. Now, in terms of additional storm cluster risk in the short term, guys, I want to show you all today's severe weather outlook. We're going to be monitoring areas across North Dakota, northern Minnesota for severe weather threat today. We have an enhanced risk that's a 3 out of 5 in terms of the severe weather threat level. As we work into this evening, all modes of severe weather on the table. This hatched yellow areas where there could be a couple of significant tornadoes possible. That includes areas like Fargo, Jamestown, and Bismarck. But we'll also need to be monitoring, especially back in North Dakota, for large hail. Could be some very large hail in these hatched areas, and then a damaging wind risk as well, especially along the main corridor of these storms as they ramp up this evening from Dickinson all the way out towards Duluth, Minnesota. And this is the start of what we call the ring of fire pattern, because what's happening is we're getting a dome of high pressure to develop down to the south and to the west. We'll take a look at that here. And subsequently, storm clusters are developing and moving north, kind of away from that high pressure. And you can see this ridge, see this dome of heat really begin to build up as we work into the weekend. In fact, as we work into early next week, the intensity of this dome of heat and this ridge of high pressure is what we call it, will be nearing record levels across parts of the eastern Great Lakes and the northeastern United States. So a very rare intense dome of heat developing across the eastern half of the country. But what will happen is we're actually going to be, number one, getting a gradient here. You can see there's a trough, some cooler air developing for a time out here in southern Canada. With the heat out to the west, we have a gradient which will favor moisture opportunities as we head into next week across this region in here. And we're actually going to be transporting moisture from the hurricane down in Mexico, the remnants of it, up into the jet stream and around this ridge of high pressure, which will provide a very heavy rainfall threat for parts of the Midwest into next week. In terms of areas further down to the south and to the east, how long does this dome linger around? Well, really a good part of next week. It will start to weaken late next week, and as that happens, we'll need to watch for some storm cluster potential to come a little bit further down to the south, kind of through this region in here as we get into late next week and into next weekend. Certainly something to keep in mind, both from a rain and a severe weather perspective. It's a time frame that I do think we need to watch carefully. And we will have a front move in as well as we get more so towards the end of June, which will moderate the heat at least for a time. But look at what happens down the road. We start to see that warmth try to pick back up again, albeit maybe a little bit further west. And that'll be a good starting point for our weeks 3 and 4 outlook in just a few moments. In terms of the heat in the short term, I do want to touch on this at least briefly here, guys. Here's a look at temperatures today up into the 100s, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, western Iowa. You can see that gradient in temperatures, which is why the severe weather threat is well to the north across the far northern plains today. As we work into tomorrow, the heat continues to expand north and eastward, but more 100s possible across parts of the central plains. And then as we work into Sunday, record breaking heat possible across parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. And then heading into Monday, that threat continues to shift a little bit further off to the east. If we look at the northeast United States into Monday, man, look at that. Look at all the record breaking high temperatures. All the circles that you see are record breaking highs Monday. And then as we work into Tuesday and Wednesday, then we slowly begin to moderate this pattern as we work into the middle to latter part of next week. In terms of that moisture potential, guys, as we work into this pattern, you can see here really looking at some heavy rain likely as we get into next week across parts of Nebraska, northwest Iowa, southeast South Dakota, Minnesota. Anything that you see kind of in this magenta color here, 3 inches plus, locally 4 inches of rain over the next 7 days in this region. But areas further down to the south and to the east under the dome of heat, drier. And I will say a lot of these areas, especially the lower Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley, have been so wet and so active from both a rain and a severe weather perspective, if you will, throughout this summer and throughout the spring. And so a drier stretch coming in here, but it will come with a lot of heat. Here's a look at how we average things out in terms of our forecast the next 2 weeks. You can see temperatures well above normal the next 7 days. We talked about precipitation the next 7 days, moderating a little bit into the week 2 time frame, but still the vast majority of the northern and eastern U.S. averaging out hotter than normal as we get into the end of June and into the start of July, but a couple of more moderate days in there compared to where we are in week 1 likely. In terms of precipitation, as we do moderate, this rainfall potential does try to bleed in a little bit further down to the south and to the east, more back into the Ohio Valley. But I will say the further south you go into the Tennessee Valley and the deep south, the more sporadic that moisture will likely verify. With all that being said, let's get into the forecast into early to mid-July. And I think this is the biggest pattern driver right now. It's our global winds. And the global winds is just a measure really of the jet streams throughout the atmosphere all across the globe. And it oscillates back and forth between a weaker state, which is more La Nina-like, and a positive state or a stronger state, which is more El Nino-like. We have been pretty consistently negative and weak with the global winds throughout spring and into early summer. Now, what's happening right now is we're dropping more notably negative. We've kind of been more neutral. This actually verified too high. Actual observation values back in early June stayed slightly negative. So there has been a positive and a strong bias in the global winds as of late. And you can see the trend. All these colors are the old runs. This white dotted line is the newest run. We've seen a consistently more negative trend in this signal. And I think that there's even the potential, based off where we're at right now, that we could end 1.5 to 2 standard deviations below normal late June and into early July, which is important because that will reinforce, even into early July, an influence of this pattern driver. If you take a look at, as we close out the last 7 days of June, here's the upper level setup. Again, that big dome of heat and ridge of high pressure in the eastern half of the country matches up very, very closely with the negative AAM correlation for June. And so this is certainly the biggest pattern driver right now, and we're seeing its influence with the heat in the eastern part of the country to end June. So I think that going into July, and especially given there's normally a little bit of a lag of the influence of it, we likely continue to feel this as a pattern driver. Now, it would support the core of the warmth coming back a little bit further to the west, more across the north central U.S. and into the Midwest rather than in the Northeast. So it does come back a little bit further to the west. If we take a look here at years that were similar with our global winds late June and into early July, here's what they did in July. It's certainly overall a warmer risk, but it would indicate that with time, the corridor of the warmest temperatures would shift a little bit further to the west. But it's a warm signal as a whole. You can start to see, this is by day 15, the EPS, instead of the core of the ridge setting up over here, it's trying to set more so up in the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest. So we're starting to see slowly but surely this tendency of the warmth maybe redeveloping rather than further east, more so in the Midwest and the Ag Belt as we work into the end of week 2 and into the start of week 3. What does it mean for precipitation? Well, I would say the signal's not super strong. It's not as intense as temperatures. There are some drier indications through here, okay? And there are some indications of kind of this ring of fire pattern in this area through here, give or take a state or so. Now, I think that we need to break this down in a little bit more detail. And so looking at years that were the most similar late June and into July like we did for temperatures, you can kind of see maybe a better signal here for some dryness across the south central plains. You can see maybe a little messy precipitation risk through parts of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, and more consistently wet signals in the south and east part of the country. I also think there's some indications of maybe some monsoonal flow into the southwestern United States. And so I think this shows maybe a little bit of a better picture. Generally speaking, while it's not bone dry anywhere, it would suggest the western and the central plains a little bit drier, the eastern ag belt a little bit more active in general. And I think that we're starting to see that in the data even in the 10 to 15 day time frame, the first 5 days of July. Here's what the EPS has. Generally a little bit drier further west, a little bit more active the further south and east you go. Matches up with this idea pretty darn well overall. Now, do we have other data support? Here's the CFS weekly. You can see overall it's warmer, and with time, it shifts the corridor of the greatest warmth further to the west. That matches very closely with that analog idea we showed earlier. And the EPS weekly, very similar, I would say, overall in that idea. And in terms of precipitation, again, you compare what the EPS has here, wetter further east, a little bit drier further to the west, probably messier rain chances kind of in the middle through this region in here. Overall, matches up pretty closely with this analog, all things considered. And so with that in mind, here's our outlook. We did trend things back warmer. We had cooled things down a little bit in the east because of some of the tropical forcing signals and that vortex that we've had at times in the Hudson Bay. But given the trend that we've seen in the global winds, I bled this warmth a little bit back further to the east. Still not as warm east as what we've been late June, with the corridor of the much above normal temperatures more so in the mountain west and towards the north central part of the country. If there is a cooler risk, I do think it's in here. The Atlantic Ocean temperatures would favor more seasonable conditions in here and much above normal temperatures trying to redevelop in here. So you're kind of warm west, more seasonable in the middle, warmer east. That would be the risk to at least monitor is, do we get more cold fronts than what the global wind signals would suggest in the Midwest? So that is the risk to this forecast. In terms of precipitation, drier across the northern plains, the Pacific Northwest. I added some drier risk under probably what will be more consistent heat dome in the south central plains. Wetter than normal, East Coast, Southeast U.S., Eastern Ohio Valley, and then kind of in the middle here, as we talked about, messy storm cluster potential. Not bone dry, but have and have nots. It's that messy pattern that many areas can cash in on rains, but some areas get completely skipped out. It's just the nature of the type of pattern. Seasonable is probably reasonable overall in terms of the general idea, but certainly want to note that there's probably going to be areas that are locally heavier, locally wetter than normal, areas that are locally drier than normal. Regardless, while we're hotter than normal and it's not as active as it's been, I don't see major red flags in terms of no moisture and combined with the much above normal temperatures. So that is at least some good news there. Guys, that's all that I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great weekend.